Options. That's the Nothing Personal Word of the Day for Thursday, November 6th, 2025. Today's episode is brought to you by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. I'm all about options. In every part of your life, you should have as many options as possible. In baseball, there are player options, there are team options, there are mutual options. In life, you've got your options. You've got to deal with other people's options. I haven't yet come across in a personal way what a mutual option is. I guess that's the definition of a partnership, where two people get together and they decide what they're going to do for dinner, whether or not they're going to buy a house, whether or not they're going to take a trip. Whatever they're going to do, they say, oh, let's have unanimity. Let it be mutual. I don't like using that word in baseball. You're reading about it every day now. Mutual options rejected. Please remember, there is no such thing as a mutual option in Major League Baseball. We call it that, but we're pretending. A mutual option is a team option because the team is in control of whether or not they want to exercise the option on the player. The only time a player has control of his destiny is when there is a player option. The way we do free agent contracts, along with all these other teams, is you sign a long-term deal. Sometimes it's only 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, occasionally a 1 year, but not really. And it comes with an amount of money that you pay the player during the course of the championship season, from April until September. Then, 5 days after the World Series, there is something called a buyout. A buyout is when you agree that either you will keep that player for another year and pay him the contracted amount, or you will not pay him that amount of money to play for you, but you will pay him a buyout. Buyouts are guaranteed. Let's give you an example of a contract. It's sort of very easy to think about. Just take anyone you want. We have so many different opportunities right now, but let's talk about, who do you want to start with? I guess we could start with Hoskins of the Brewers. He's the first baseman, from the Phillies maybe. Milwaukee, hurt, fine, Brewers, you know what they're going to do. They signed him to a contract, and they had what's called a mutual option, which we've now established is a team option. But what they did is they had a choice, and this was all Brewers. Either they pay him $18 million to play for them next season, or they give him $4 million not to play. The $4 million is called the buyout. When you sign your original contract, when we talk about what the total amount of guarantee money is, that includes the buyout, not the amount of the team option when there is an option, or a mutual option when there's an option at the end of the contract. So the Brewers say, we have to make a decision on Hopkins. And what you might be saying is, it's an $18 million question, because do we pay him 18 or not? But that's not the decision or the discussion in the front office. It's actually a $14 million question, because either you pay him 18 or you pay him 4. And so what you're deciding is Hoskins. I keep calling him Hopkins, excuse me. Have I been calling him Hopkins the entire show, Coca? If so, just cut that and just replace, I've been saying Hoskins? Okay, good. I feel like I've been saying Hopkins. 4869. Hoskins. The decision is, do we pay him $14 million? The exercise that a team does when they're eliminated, whether it is at the end of the regular season or at any point during the playoffs, is they immediately mark all of their players to market, meaning they don't assign an amount that they are due to get paid. They assign an amount that they ought to get paid. What is Hoskins worth to the Brewers? The number the Brewers were solving for is 14. And so when the Brewers declined the option on Hoskins, which they did, what they are saying is he's not worth $14 million. What Hoskins gets to do now, he gets to collect $4 million from the Brewers, and that's pre-negotiated when he gets paid. Very often in our contracts, when you decline an option and have to pay a buyout, it gets paid out within 7 days of the option being declining. You can negotiate that it gets paid out over 6 months. You can negotiate, if you're the Nationals or the Dodgers, that it gets paid out over 6 years or 10 years. But generally, you like to get it paid out as quickly as possible. At least we did. Get it off your books. But for the Milwaukee Brewers, one thing that they will do as a small payroll team that we don't discuss with our fans is whether or not we budget that $4 million for last year or for next year. Because some teams would say that a $4 million buyout paid to Hoskins, that counts toward next year's payroll. And so when we give a payroll to our general manager every year, we also tell the general manager which players we are counting toward his payroll. So the Marlins, as an example, are paying the Yankees $10 million of Giancarlo Stanton's contract next season. When Peter Bendix, the president of baseball operations, and Gabe Kapler, the newly minted general manager of the Marlins, when they build their payroll and put their team together, they have to take into account the $10 million being paid to Stanton. There are some teams who would have Hoskins in 2025. The amount of money he gets paid plus a November payment of $4 million, which is his buyout, and count that to the last year's payroll. It's always a negotiation with your general manager, because what do you think general managers want to do? The same thing owners want to do. They want to push any amount of money they can into future years. They want to backload contracts. They want to take all buyout money and move it into the following season so they can maximize the money they have available for this particular season. But the problem is this particular season ends, and then it's time for next season. And then you look at your books and you're saying, crikeys, we have to pay Hoskins $4 million not to play for us. My view as team president is I did not like doing that. I didn't like deferring money. I didn't like counting buyouts toward the next year's payroll. I liked counting buyouts toward the current year payroll because I wanted as much money as possible playing for us each particular year. But the Brewers not only did it with Hoskins, they also did it with one of their pitchers, Jose Quintana. He got a $15 million option that was declined. Instead, he's getting $2 million from the Brewers. So the Milwaukee Brewers, and they are a great example of a team that is run incredibly well by Matt Arnold, incredible success all the way to the LCS this year before being swept by the Dodgers. But it's not a small deal that there is $6 million that is out the door before they have a penny toward their roster for 2026. One of the things that will come up in collective bargaining is the fact that the Milwaukee Brewers, as an example, had to decline the $15 million option on Quintana because they didn't view him as a $13 million player. There are several teams who would look at him and say, wow, the ability to have someone come in and start 20 games during the course of a season, the ability to be our load management guy to take over when we are sitting our October pitchers, $13 million for that, I like it. The reason why I tell you that only team options are therefore beneficial to the team is that you're reading a lot about all of these different opt-outs, these different options, like Jack Flaherty. He had an ability to opt out of his contract with Detroit, and he declined. He's going to get paid $20 million next year, and the Tigers didn't have a choice in the matter. Jack Flaherty is not a $20 million pitcher, and the Tigers had no choice. Trevor Story, I'm not going to opt out of my contract. I'm going to keep my $55 million from the Red Sox. Why? Because I can't go to the market and get $27.5 million a year from anybody. I can't go to the market and get more than $55 million from anybody. When Trevor Story was signed to the contract by the Red Sox, don't forget how excited Red Sox fans were. They were getting one of the top shortstops on the market. And yes, there was a opt-out for him. And the thought was, hey, man, he may opt out. We may have to renegotiate. We may have to pay him more. But more often than not, it goes the other way. When you're promised an opt-out, when you're talking to an agent or a player, and they say, no, I love it here. I promise you my opt-out, I'm not going to use it unless I'm so miserable and the team is so stinky. It's just not the case. The Boston Red Sox, who wouldn't want to be a part of that organization? The reason why players use or don't use an opt-out is based solely on their market value. That is it. Why do you think Jock Peterson would exercise an option for $18.5 million? Just out of curiosity. Jock Peterson. You don't think twice about it. Oh, he's got an $18.5 million player option. This is when it hurts. $18.5 million for Jock Peterson is an outrage. Now, we can certainly talk about one more thing for my friends in Chicago. I just want to mention it. I don't know if you guys are upset about Imanaga, the Japanese pitcher who started off so well. I would tell you that he was less than effective later in the season. But let's talk about what happened there. When he first signed, there was an opportunity where one of the ways you can have an interesting contract is that at a point during a long-term deal, the team gets the opportunity to decide whether they, as a team option, not whether they'll pick up 1 year, but whether they will decide to pick up multiple years. We negotiated that with players before. It makes you make a decision at a certain point in time about what you think the future of that player is and what you think that player is worth at that moment in the open market. His deal with the Cubs had a provision where the Cubs either had to extend his contract out to 2028, which, as you know, is 3 years from now, or his contract would revert into a 1-year player option. And if the team chose to decline to give him 3 years, $57 million, which he's not worth, then he would have an opportunity to take 1 year, $15 million from the team. That is a way for, think about what happened here. 57 divided by 3, it's sort of easy math. You could just say it's $19 million if you so choose. When you sign a player to a deal that allows you to give him 3 years, 57, and if you don't, then he will take if he wants 1 year 15. That means when you've negotiated, you've said that the player wants you to value him at $19 million. You believe that his value may be closer to $15 million, and so you negotiate that provision. In the Cubs situation, they didn't value Imanaga as a $19 million player, but he valued himself as more than a $15 million player. So what happens? The Cubs decline the extension, then Imanaga declines the player option, and now he's a free agent. The next thing you have to negotiate in that scenario where the team doesn't do the team option, the extension, the player doesn't do the player option, but the player then is a free agent, you can negotiate whether that player will or will not be eligible to receive a qualifying offer. A qualifying offer is a concept that we talk about every year, and this year it's up to $22 million. It's when you make an offer to a pending free agent that you have on your team, and you say, we'll take you back for a year. We're going to give you an offer of a 1-year deal at $22 million. You can accept it. You can reject it. It's totally up to the player. If the team makes an offer, a qualifying offer to a player, and the player rejects it, Kyle Tucker will not accept a qualifying offer from the Cubs because he's going to go into the market and get more than 1 year, get more than $22 million a year. If you make an offer and it gets rejected by the player, you get an extra draft pick, assuming he signs. If you make a qualifying offer to a player, there's always a risk the player's going to take it. When the Cubs decide what they're going to do with Imanaga, if they offer him a qualifying offer of $22 million, that is more in 1 year than what the team was going to pay him if they extended him out for 3 years on an average annual basis. It's more than he would have made on a 1-year deal if he'd accepted what the Cubs contractually would have to have paid him, which is 15. So it's a fascinating thought that Imanaga may have not been offered 3 years, 57. He may not have accepted 1 year, 15, and instead could end up with 1 year, 22 from the Cubs. The other little known secret here is that all these players that you read about, Chris Sale, and he got his club option extended, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, and 2 weeks ago, and 4 weeks ago, every player agent is calling the teams to figure out what is the opportunity for their player in the wide open market. It's all against the rules, but we fielded calls from agents starting in August about what we thought about players on other teams, what we thought about where our payroll was going to be, what we thought our team needed. The reason why agents do that on a consistent basis is they need information to give to the player so the player can decide whether to opt out, whether to exercise this player option. Teams, we don't need to talk to agents. We don't need to talk to other teams. We mark our players to market. Agents and players don't do it that way. What a press release we got yesterday. Loved it. We told you Major League Baseball would do it, and they did. And I give them credit because you got to do it. Game 7 of the 2025 World Series averaged, wait for it, 51 million viewers. Well, that's a different number than we heard. We thought that the number was, 16, 18, 19 million, 21 million. Where do you get 51 from? Let's read it more carefully. Game 7 of the 2025 World Series averaged 51 million viewers combined across the United States, Canada, and Japan, making it the most watched baseball game in 34 years. What an amazing announcement. Here's why it matters, folks. Why were people in Canada watching in record numbers? Hold on, I can't think of a reason. There may have been some Canadian-born players. I think Freddie Freeman, his family may be from Toronto. He may have grown up in Toronto. I think that it's true that there was a player who had been to Canada once and had eaten poutine. I think. Seriously, folks. The Toronto Blue Jays were in the World Series. There's no other Canadian teams. They captured the heart of the country, and half the damn country was watching. Guess what's not going to happen next year if the Blue Jays aren't in the World Series? Those people won't be watching. Hold on. Let's think about Japan. Was there anybody who would be of interest in Japan playing in the World Series? I'll give it a minute. Oh, yeah. Yamamoto, the MVP. There was one of the great Japanese pitchers pitching in the World Series. I don't think anyone else was. I know Ichiro wasn't playing. He's still very popular. But Yamamoto drove these ratings in Japan just miraculously. Like his name was Kaz Matsui. I'm talking unbelievable. If you can't sense it because it's a Thursday and maybe I'm tired and grumpy with rolls under my eyes, and also an unbelievable amount of widow's peak. Then, of course, Ohtani in the World Series, the Blue Jays in the World Series, you're damn right you're going to get a record. And even though you know that you are not going to get that next year short of a rematch of the Blue Jays-Dodgers, short of Ohtani being what Ohtani is, which there's no indication he won't be, you don't worry about the fact that next year you're not going to be able to report this same press release. You take advantage of now. Of course you put out there that you got 51 million viewers because you're trying to make your league different than the NBA, and they got different already. Forget the NFL. Not going to talk about them. They got different than the NBA because they already got to announce that Game 7 was already higher than the Game 7 in the NBA Finals last year. Let's not discuss the fact that it was the Oklahoma City Thunder. There's no reason. Let's be positive. The reason why this matters, it's only to people like us. At the negotiating table, I must tell you, as much fun as it is to write a press release with what your ratings are, when Major League Baseball goes to the negotiating table to replace ESPN, when they go to the negotiating table in 3 years to do way more fully baked national-based deals, this won't even come up. When there's a discussion about what is the value, this conversation, not happening. Why? It is true that there will be a deal in Japan. It is true that Netflix Japan would have great interest in eyeballs, or Netflix Canada. It is true that there are networks throughout Canada, Sportsnet. There's networks that would have an interest in having rights to the World Series, rights to the jewel events. But what drives the NBA deals that they started this year, it was the U.S. And it is true. All sorts of MVPs, like the last 6 in NBA, have been non-Americans. It is true that the NBA is a global sport. It is true that Major League Baseball can announce that they've got more foreign-born players than any other league. The problem is where the players are born in Major League Baseball are not countries that have any material impact on the value of a rights deal. Dominican Republic, Venezuela, doesn't matter. They are not coming to the table with anything. The more Japanese players that come to play in Major League Baseball who can perform, the more Yamamotos, there's only one Ohtani, the more Yamamotos you can get, the bigger opportunity you can get a larger deal in Japan proper, but the streaming companies will now compete with the land-based, terrestrial-based networks in Japan. Incremental dollars, they matter. But in terms of catching the NBA, in terms of overall value, it's about the major networks here in the US. Do I disagree with that announcement? Absolutely not. Does it matter? Absolutely not. One of the things that we do, and a shout out to Matthew, thank you. We got a correction. I told you yesterday, corrections are important to me. We have no script. We are live. I say things off the top of my head and I make mistakes. I gave you bad information and I'm going to follow up. I told you that I thought that the player pool this year in Major League Baseball to the playoff teams, the amount of money that will go to Dodgers players, Blue Jays players, Brewers players, Mariners players, I thought that that was based on the length of a series, where if the series goes 7, the way the Dodgers series did in that unbelievable Game 7 against the Blue Jays, that would mean a larger pool. I was right in telling you that the size of the venue matters, and Dodger Stadium ticket prices, the Rogers Center ticket prices, all of that matters. But the players' pool is formed from gate receipts over only the first 4 games of a series, both World Series and League Championship Series. So the fact that it went 7 actually does not impact at all what the size of the share is. It's the size of the stadium and the first 4 games. Matthew, thank you. Corrections, they happen. I want to remind everyone that there is no show tomorrow. We will be back Monday. And next Wednesday is a So You Want to Talk to Samson Wednesday, as they all are. So please, if you're watching this on the Nothing Personal with David Samson YouTube channel, please hit subscribe and then call this number. 20 to 40 second voicemails would be a chef's kiss. 631-377-4869 is the number. Ask me a question. So you want to talk to Samson? Give me a comment, something that may be used in the show where you may hear your voice. That's 631-377-4869. All right, Coke, I've been waiting for this. I've been waiting for like 90 weeks. Let's do the review. I'm so happy today's Thursday because on Thursdays we review movies from my top 100 list, which is found at davidsamsonpodcast.com. You can find all sorts of cool stuff on the website, but one of the things is that you are going to find my top 100 list. And every single Thursday, we review a movie from the top 100. Today, it is my number 3 movie on my top 100 list, Lost in Translation. I didn't need to watch it since last week because I'd watched it, I would say the first week of September is when I saw it. It may have been August, but I've watched it very recently. I've seen Lost in Translation, 20 times. I've gone to Tokyo and stayed at the Park Hyatt where Lost in Translation is filmed, and I've heard the beeps of the elevator where Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson met. I have been on the phone where Bill Murray at the end of the movie calls Scarlett Johansson and says, "You've got my sweater. You are a sweater stealer." I've walked in the street where Bill Murray said goodbye to Scarlett Johansson at the end. The feeling that you have when you get to Tokyo, the feeling of exhaustion, the feeling of sensory overload, the feeling of love for that city, that country that I have, is manifested through this movie. The karaoke, the arcades, all the things that you see if you are ever lucky enough to go to Tokyo or Japan. Just watch the movie. And I want to just give you my theory on one of the greatest mysteries in any movie of all time. At the end of the movie, Bill Murray is saying goodbye to Scarlett Johansson on the street. He gives her a hug, draws her in close, and whispers something in her ear. The question is, what does he whisper? There have been people who have tried to examine the videotape. There have been people who have separated the audio. They've asked the writers. They've interviewed people on set. They have tried to figure out how to solve this mystery. I have called Pablo Torre's hotline and asked him to find out what Bill Murray says to Scarlett Johansson. But I have a theory. I think what he said is, I will see you again. Just not today. Not today. And that is a theory that I have lived with and tried to live by, which is saying goodbye to people where you have shared a moment. I don't like to think to myself that that moment is done and I will never see that person again, or I will never get to talk to that person again. I want that. I want to feel that connection. So I'd like to believe Bill Murray just said, see you later. That's lost in translation. Next week, we get to review Boogie Nights. Now that, Coca, I'm going to watch again this coming week. I have to, because I haven't seen that in a bit. We only have 7 movies left to review. So we should be done before the new year, which would enable us to do another top 100 and move everything around for next year. Of course, I said that last year, but it's not like I have anything else going on. So I'm definitely going to get to it this year. But I'm going to watch Boogie Nights again for sure. Monday, if you're looking for a movie and you want to follow my review, I've got a plan, Coca. It's now available to stream. I'm going to watch The Smashing Machine because I want to check out Dwayne Johnson and whether or not he actually can be dramatic. Any movie with Emily Blunt is a movie I'm going to see. So I'm going to watch The Smashing Machine at some point this weekend and review it Monday. Nothing personal pick of the day. Nothing personal pick of the day presented by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. It's week 10 already. Thursday night, we got the Broncos playing the Raiders. In case you haven't realized, the Raiders, Pete Carroll notwithstanding, Tom Brady and his dog notwithstanding, stink. The Denver Broncos, meanwhile, somehow, some way, no Elway, no Manning. Who's their quarterback? Well, let me tell you something. The New York Knicks have a chance to actually do something this year. Broncos 9.5 over the Raiders. Book it. It's going to be a Thursday night blowout. And then we're giving you a pick for Sunday. We're going all NFL. We're ignoring the NBA. No matter how hot we are, we're going NFL. The Los Angeles Chargers are playing Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. How do the Steelers get only 3 points? How's that even possible? I would take Justin Herbert over Aaron Rodgers every day, twice on Sunday, having nothing to do with Reed. I would take the Chargers over the Steelers every day. 3 points? 3 points? That is our nothing personal pick of the day presented by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Broncos 9.5 over Raiders. Chargers 3 over Steelers on Sunday nights. We good with that, Coca? Okay, let's go to what happened last night. Do you know I always tell you that when I lose a pick of the day because a line moved? Because when I give you the line, like I did yesterday, Cavs 9.5 over the Sixers, that's the line. We lock it in. Coca locks it in. And sometimes the line will move not in my favor, like every time, except last night. Last night, the line moved from 9.5 to 12.5, and the Cavs won by 11. If you paid attention and you did the Cavs minus 9.5 over the Sixers, you're a winner. If you waited and you took the Cavs 12.5, you're a loser. However, maybe with the line movement, you switched it and took the Sixers, then you're a winner also. We're up to 138 and 141, trying to climb back to 500. It's like in a basketball game, Coco, when you're down 20 and then you come back, you get within 2 and then you lose by 12. That's how I feel this entire season of picks have gone, where I get to 500, I get over 500, I feel like I'm home free, and then I lose 20 in a row. But I'm climbing back, baby. Very important weekend for me. I love earnings calls. That may be the Wall Street in me. I assume that you all find that dry, just so dry. An earnings call is when a CEO gets on a phone call with a bunch of analysts on Wall Street and says, this is what we thought would happen this year, and it did or didn't. This is what we think's going to happen next year, and you can bet your ass it's going to happen. That's the job of the finance people, the CEOs, the people who are on calls. Their job is to make Wall Street believe that they know what they're doing and they know how to forecast. They know how to project. It's why it's such a big deal when you get on an earnings call and say, oh, we thought we'd have 5 cents earnings per share and we ended up with 2 cents. Well, that's a damn big difference. Or, hey, we expected $500 million in revenue and we got $400 million in revenue. Well, are you kidding? You missed it by 20%. Hey, we would like to caution you that we may not hit our revenue number. That's another very popular one. You do that in advance. We may have a problem in the fourth quarter of this year because we're seeing same-store sales decrease at a level we didn't expect. It's sort of like airlines being told they have to cancel 10% of their flights at 40 different airports and having them say, wait a minute, the government shutdown is crushing us. We're going to have to adjust our earnings and revenue. It's how it goes. Baseball teams, I never had to do an earnings call with Wall Street for baseball, privately owned. I definitely had to do earnings calls with the owner, definitely had to do meetings with limited partners, definitely had to say, here's where we are, here's where we're headed, here's what we're going to do if we miss. We'll trade them all. Here's what we do. If we are overperforming, we'll sign them all. It's a very simple business, to tell you the truth. The Atlanta Braves are a public team. I think you know that. I think you know that Terry McGurk is the CEO of the Braves. I think you know that. The chairman of the Braves. I think you have that in your head. I think you're aware in Atlanta that they have this area outside of their stadium. They did all of this development and they called it the Battery. They called this area, it's a mixed-use development. If you've been there, they've got stuff to do, places to stay, money to spend. It's a destination way more than 81 times a year. I think you know that so many other teams are trying the very same thing in what is a copycat world of business. Build me a stadium, but I need mixed-use development around it. Let's do a public-private partnership, but we're going to build a ton of stuff and we're going to take the money from it. Why is this important? Because the Atlanta Braves are succeeding in a way that every other team in sports would like to emulate, and no one else is even close. The Braves' mixed-use development, the Battery, has been such a great success. The Braves' revenue is $311 million. That's a 7% growth. That's pretty good, right? We'd take that. 7% growth year over year, not too shabby. That revenue is subject to revenue sharing. When the Braves announce, which they announce publicly, but the league knows, the union knows, the baseball revenue, local baseball revenue, $311 million. Revenue sharing is based on the local component of that amount. But what about the mixed-use development? How much money did they make from that? Well, they had to announce it, and they did. They announced a 56% increase year over year, and they made $27.2 $1.2 million. I would just like to point out that when you've got quarterly earnings of revenue of $27 million, when you have the ability to generate that amount of money, forget the fact that it was the All-Star game, not the point of this conversation. The point of this conversation is that all that money that the Braves had, do you remember when Terry McGurk said that, hey, we had our powder dry and we're ready to pounce at the trade deadline, but nothing really made sense to us? And now Terry McGurk says during the offseason that we want to be and will be a top 5 payroll, that we are going to be very aggressive in free agency. The Atlanta Braves have become a financial behemoth in a market that you would not expect to be in that position. And this is not me poo-pooing in any way, poo-pooing Atlanta. It is me telling you that when you look at geography, when you look at teams and where they are, the Atlanta Braves should not be a top 5 payroll team. However, they're able to generate this amount of revenue that, if they choose, can go into the baseball team. They can choose to take revenue not associated with revenue sharing and move it to the expense side of the baseball team. Think about the way Terry McGurk said it to the analysts. He said, what we're doing within this organization is truly unique, not only in baseball, but in all of professional sports. The continued momentum and strategic interplay between our baseball and real estate remains remarkable, and it reflects the long-term vision that has set our organization apart. He got it wrong. The long-term vision, that's not what sets you apart, because every team wants to do it. Every team has that same long-term strategic vision and hope and desire, except you did it right. The execution of the battery, the success of the battery within your city, somehow it just hit. It's not able to be replicated. I'm a guy who tried to replicate so many things with our stadium in Miami. I'm a guy who tried to replicate things when I was on Wall Street, trying to replicate best practices. You go to conferences, you go to meetings, you're always trying to learn best practices. What is the way that I can be better in order for me and my company to be more profitable, to generate more revenue? That's always the point. What do you do when you have a unicorn? At least be honest about it. The reality is you can go to all these different communities, all of whom are trying this. Miami's trying it around their soccer stadium. Inter Miami's attempting it. We thought we could do it around Marlins Park. St. Louis has a village that was an example of a great mixed use development around a ballpark. And guess what? Not many years later, not helping at all. Look where the Cardinals are. How do you address this if you're Major League Baseball? This is very important as we head into collective bargaining. Because while it is true that the Chicago Bears want to do this in Arlington, that the Commanders are trying to do this, that, listen, the Rays are going to try to do it in Tampa. Just think about what was announced in Washington with the Wizards and the Capitals. Think about what the Cleveland Browns are doing by moving outside of the city into their area, Brook Park. Everyone is trying to find a way to avoid giving money to a pot that allows your competitors to better compete against you. Everybody would rather keep their money outside of baseball and into their poche, into their pocket. If you are Major League Baseball and the Players Union, and you are trying to figure out how to deal with payroll disparity, how to deal with revenue disparity, is there a world where that non-baseball related real estate revenue would be part of revenue sharing? Do you believe that the Braves would have had an opportunity to have this development but for the ballpark and but for Major League Baseball? My argument, which has been like passing gas in the wind, like the Big Lebowski, John Goodman inhaling the ashes, it has gone unheard. I have argued for years, both when I was within baseball and even after I've left, that to not count this revenue is a disservice to the concept of revenue sharing. Because you have to believe that if you go to a particular city and you have an owner who's in real estate and that owner is doing development in a city without sports, that has to be differentiated from the development that a real estate owner or any owner does around sports. You have to make that distinction. I'm not asking for the revenue from people who develop shopping malls where they don't have their teams. I want the revenue from the shopping malls and the mixed-use development around where they do have their teams, because the difference has to be baseball related. I don't see how you could look at it any other way. On the other hand, I can't get one person to agree. You don't think that the Mets with their casino money should be sharing that? I don't even know if they're going to have casino money, Coca. I really don't. We'll see what happens in the next CBA. As you know, we're keeping track because there's a lot of possibilities of what is going to happen with owner v. owner and how they're going to need to discuss amongst themselves what to negotiate with the players. One of the differentiating factors is the ability to make and print money that a team like the Braves has, but the Braves have to admit it publicly and other teams don't. Did you know that all your favorite NBA players are back? And DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, is the place to bet on NBA stars this season. It's the place. New customers bet just $5 and get 3 months of NBA League Pass. Plus, score $300 if your bet wins. Not too shabby. That $300 if your bet wins is paid in bonus bets. Please download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code Samson. That's code SAMSON. Bet $5 and get 3 months of League Pass, plus get $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. All of this is in partnership with DraftKings, our partner, because DraftKings, the crown is yours. Welcome back to Nothing Personal. It's David Samson on a Thursday, November 6, 2025. You'd think that Coca is only here Fridays, but for the past few weeks and for the next few weeks, we're going to have Coca on Thursdays because there is no Friday show. Coca, that was your cue. Let's go. We got so much to talk about. There's breaking news again.
That was it? That was the cue?
How do you want to be introduced? Tell me and I'll do it. The greatest producer in the history of podcasts is willing to go on screen once a year.
I think it's like an expectation. You know, once a year? Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's an expectation. But right now, I just, you know when your eyes are dry, so you go to use eye drops, but now it just like feels like you're crying and you look like you're crying. So right now, I just want people to know that I'm not crying. I'm not overly emotional at the moment. I just used some eye drops, and now I'm trying to like blink them back to normal.
Coca, here's something you didn't know about me. I have never put eye drops in my eyes. The only time it happens is when I go to the eye doctor once a year and they dilate my pupils, but I have never used Visine. I've never done anything. I've never had an eye infection that required eye drops or me putting them in, not one time in 57, almost 30.
Yeah, shout out to the people that know, because if they know, they know. But yeah, I've been using eye drops forever. And
are you talking about hangovers?
No, and this time it just, you know, I needed a little more than that 3-minute break to get them back to normal. But
can I tell you a funny eye drop story, Coca?
Yeah, go for
it. People know the bus story when we took John Henry's bus, and John Henry, and this is not something that I would make fun of because it's not nice, but he has a condition where his eyes don't tear or something, or they don't water, and he's an amazing guy, but he has to have like eye drops all over. So when we took over the bus from the Marlins at the time, back in 2002, we found little eye drop cases like everywhere. Like I have reading glasses in various places. John would have these eye drop things, and I felt like, should I give them back to him? Did I throw them away? But then I realized he probably has like hundreds of them in various pockets and places, so he doesn't have to ever think about being in a place where he doesn't have them. But I'm the opposite. I have no eyedroppers.
Or he just, you know, used the bus as a hot box, and that was his cover up, was to say that he can't cry. Could be that. But I don't think so. But I'm also not crying over Tom Brady and his dog, because I know you wanted to talk about this one, and it's so bizarre. It is so bizarre that Tom Brady, he said it, right? And he's an investor in this company, and you know, that's why this is public information. And it's that he cloned his dog before it died. He took blood from his dog and now used it in his new dog. I do not understand it. I don't even know if it works, because I feel like his dog doesn't really look like his new dog doesn't look like his old dog. Like, why not just get the same breed of dog and just call it a day?
So the reason I wanted to talk about this is when you're dealing with a health issue or a family health issue, you start thinking about weird things. And so I've thought about the concept of cloning, and I had a very strong opinion about it, and it was a completely negative opinion. And I don't like dogs. I had a dog and then it died, and that was it. And I was fine with that. Because the kids always say they're going to take care of the dog and then they don't. And then you have to do it like after every game when you get home at midnight and you're angry that the team lost. And then you got to take the dog to do a final piss or poop, whatever. But what if you are so attached to something and that attachment never has to be broken? What if there were the technology? Would you, as yourself, and I'm going to do this very personally, is there someone in your life, maybe they're older, and maybe they've been in your life for a long time? What if you could promise that person would be in your life forever? Would you do it?
Maybe, but I don't even think that's the story here, because the story here is he named the dog something else. That's like you keeping someone in your life and cloning the person in your life, but when you brought them back, you gave them a different name.
Because it It is a different person.
That's not what a clone is.
Wait, are you saying that it's the exact same person in every way?
That is what a clone is. That's the whole point of a clone.
I thought you said his dog doesn't look like his first dog.
That is what I'm talking about, but he's calling it a clone. So then the company
sucks.
That's what it sounds like. It sounds like a lot of fugazi here, because if it's a clone, then the dog should look exactly like the other dog, and the dog should have the same name as the other dog. If not, it's just a new dog. Like, why can't he just say he just got a new dog? Because that's what it is. I think we'll have
to go examine the company's website, because I thought cloning was literally like I viewed it as a synonym to reincarnation.
No, a clone is an exact replica of the other thing.
Right, that's reincarnation. The person comes back.
But that's what I'm saying. Then why would you give it a different name?
I'm going to have to really think about this, because I'm applying this to human beings. I guess I could apply. The first time I ever read about cloning was with a sheep, but that makes me old. I think that was a super long time ago, and somebody invented cloning and they cloned a sheep. And then you watch Jurassic Park and you think, wow, are they cloning dinosaurs? But then you realize in the movie they have to use froggy DNA in order to cover up some of the lapses in the DNA chain and some of the breakages. But if I could get an exact replica and someone who I love could last forever and they would be them, I would still give it a different name, like part 2, let's say, or just a different first name. But I would be able to revel in the fact that I'd have more time with the characteristics of the underlying person who's no longer with you.
I just think that everything we hear about Tom Brady just becomes weirder and weirder and weirder. Like from his playing days when he had that, I think his name was like Alex Guerrero or something, who was like his trainer.
Is he the one that the Patriots wouldn't allow in the facilities?
Exactly. And then the TB12 method. It's just a lot of stuff that comes out about this guy is just so bizarre. Just too bizarre for me.
I think that the reason I give him grace is that I think the people who are the best at anything, the best singer, the best overall musician, the best actor, the best painter, the best artist, the best sculptor, the best athlete, the best quarterback, I think the reason they all deserve grace is that they have sacrificed in order to be the best. And often what they've sacrificed is their sanity. Often what they've sacrificed is their level of strangeness or their level of unrelatability. How can any of us relate to the greatest? Because we're all ordinary. Some things we do are extraordinary, which is cool. Some things we do are less than perfect, which is fine. But the GOAT, I think you got to give Tom Brady a break. Now, I can't stand the fact that he is the GOAT, because I'm not a Patriots fan by any stretch, but he is the GOAT. It's like Vincent van Gogh. It's like so many artists, so many authors. Coca, what book did you tell me to read? Come on, and I love it. Confederacy of Dunces. Do you remember you had me read that book?
You told me to read that book.
Oh, did you read it?
I tried to. It just felt like it was never going to end.
Do you know the story of the author of that book?
I don't believe I looked into the history.
So the author of the book took his life, and musicians who overdose, actors who overdose. I think that we don't give enough microphone time to what it is to be great at something, to what it is to be in public. I think Tom Brady is so highly scrutinized that I'm going to give him grace for being weird. I think that he's going to be one of those guys who's going to try to look young forever, and it's not going to work. And I think it's going to go south. But on the other hand, I understand the pressure that he feels to do it. And maybe, what about in a divorce scenario with Giselle? What if his kids wanted the same dog when they were visiting him? Did you think about that?
Well, no, because it was his dog.
So what if he gave the clone to Giselle?
I don't know. Once again, it is just a bizarre story. And if you're out there and you're listening, don't do this. Don't do this.
Why?
Just go,
that's
guys.
Not what
guys,
we do.
That's what I do, guys. Just go buy a new dog. Actually, don't even buy a new dog. Adopt. Don't shop. There are so many dogs out there that need loving homes. Go get one of those dogs. You don't need to clone or pretend to clone a dog. Just adopt a dog.
Coca, can we keep track of your things? You just said adopt, don't shop. You always tell me players over picks, right? You like players over picks.
Yes, sir.
Can we make a list of your sort of theories of living?
Yeah, because I mean, they're not.
I think
people
would
not
find
mine.
them interesting.
I don't think they're. I think I just live by them. I didn't come up with them.
No, but they're yours.
I just live by them. But players over picks is definitely one of them. And listen, that's a good segue to get into what happened with the Colts and the Jets, because this was a big trade. A lot of people outside of Indy fans are scrutinizing this trade, and they're calling it a massive overpay. And if you're the Colts, this is not a massive overpay for you, because you're getting a 25-year-old corner who has the ability. We've seen he has the ability to be a top-tier corner in the NFL. You have Super Bowl aspirations this year because Daniel Jones is playing, like first-round pick Daniel Jones, as opposed to, Giants loser quarterback Daniel Jones. So you have these 2 first-round picks in 26 and 27. Those players aren't going to help you win this year. It's likely that a 2026 first-round pick isn't going to help you win next year. But now you have Sauce Gardner who comes into the fold, and you have what could be an elite-level corner on your team right now this season. So that's why I say players over picks, but it depends on the team. Because in this case with the Colts, it is players over picks. Because you're in a win now mode, and you're hoping that you can contend this year. Because you look at the Chiefs have looked a lot more vulnerable this year than they ever have. The same thing goes with the Bills. The Bills are a top tier team in the AFC, but even that team has a lot of flaws. So if you're the Colts, this could be your window, and your window could be 1 year. So why not try and give up those picks, get Sauce Gardner in there, try and elevate your defense and catch lightning in a bottle and go and try and win a Super Bowl this year. But it
sounds like you're not criticizing the Jets either in this trade.
No. I think it's smart for what the Jets did. But I think that fans now, now it's about fans having to be realistic, and that's the hardest message to get across. But I think there is an overwhelming majority of Jets fans who see this and they say, that's a lot of first-round picks. That's a lot of chances for us to hit on something. We're a bad football team right now. We should have tore it down a few years ago and tried to rebuild from there, and they did, and it just went wrong. With the Aaron Rodgers injury, which we don't really talk about a lot, but Aaron Rodgers tearing his Achilles in that game, really changed the trajectory of how the Jets seasons were going to play out, and we've seen that. But now you have 2 first-round picks next year. You have 3 first-round picks in 2027, which draft analysts are saying is going to be a loaded class. Now it's about getting that right. So I don't scrutinize any of these teams for the things they did or the decisions that they made. The only team that really confuses me is the Cowboys, because I don't think Quinnen Williams is a player who's going to help them, with the needs that they have in their secondary. But I like what the Colts did, and I like what the Jets did, and I think it's okay for people to not have to be like, this team won the trade, this team fleeced the other team, because in this case, I think both teams, got better for the positions that they're in.
Sounds like you're only players over picks for teams that are in a competitive window. Yeah. And if they're out of the competitive window, then you're picks over players.
Exactly.
So you're like everybody else. You're a buyer when you can buy. You're a seller when you can sell, when you need to sell. That seems ordinary. Maybe what differentiates you is the evaluation of who's a buyer and who's a seller, and who should be a buyer versus who should be a seller. Because it sounds like what you're saying is the Cowboys should not have been a buyer, which means they should have prioritized picks over players. The Jets were a correct seller, so they should have prioritized picks over players. But the Colts are 7-2, so they should prioritize players over picks.
Yeah, and there are people who are in the chat right now who are talking about Sauce Gardner, and some of them are saying the things with massive overpays, and I just want to respond to some of that and say, David, you've been in winning locker rooms and you've been in losing locker rooms before. When things are bad, the best of the players, they usually don't perform at the highest levels. That's just the way it works in team sports. Everybody, the defense is going to blame the offense is going to blame the defense. And for a long time, it's been the Jets defense that's been carrying this team. And now you're seeing, they're 1-7 this year. The season's gone. Sauce just signed a long-term deal. So he's comfortable. He doesn't have anything to prove right now, and it's just there's no motivation in playing for losing teams. There just isn't. When the season is gone and you can feel the season's gone, there are a lot of elite level players who don't play. I mean, that's just the nature of the sport.
So is it every sport? Are you saying that in a losing situation, players with long-term contracts try less hard than players on one-year deals or pending free agents where they are literally playing for their dinner next season? Is that the differentiating factor?
Absolutely.
So Sauce Gardner, with his ineffectiveness for the Jets, shaded by injury, but whatever, ineffectiveness was based on record because he already had the deal. And now with the Colts, you're going to see the all-pro Sauce Gardner.
That's exactly what my theory is, and we'll see if it plays out that way. And I think he's in a new defensive scheme, which is going to allow him to sort of be the Sauce Gardner that he was, 2 years ago. And this is a 25-year-old. He's a two-time All-Pro as a 25-year-old. We're not talking about a 31-year-old, corner who's on the other side of his prime. This is a guy who can, enter into his prime. Because a lot of the times we do this in sports is that we see a 21-year-old or a 22-year-old excel, and then we think that every single 21 and 22-year-old has to excel. And if they don't excel at that age, then they're automatically a bust, that they're not good enough, that they can't be good enough. We see it all the time in soccer. You'll see an 18-year-old kid who's all world, and then, you hope the 18-year-old who's on your team is going to be all world too. And it doesn't work out like that, and we're seeing it more and more with quarterbacks in the league who are getting those second chances, whether it's Sam Darnold, whether it's Daniel Jones right now. The last few years we've seen it with Geno Smith, where there are people who, sometimes they do have bad seasons and then they come back and they show that they can be a great player in the league. So I'm not writing off Sauce Gardner because he's been on 2 straight bad losing Jets teams. And now he's on a team that can be a contender.
When we talk about schemes, and I don't mean field of schemes, I don't mean financing of ballparks. Do you think the Jets had a defensive scheme that they purposefully had put in that didn't allow Sauce Gardner to be the player that they needed him and wanted him to be? But they're going to the Colts and they're going to have a scheme that's going to accentuate his abilities. I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're, if that was part of your theory.
There's different coaches, right? He's been playing under different coaches.
But they're all trying to get the max out of their best players.
No, they're not. That's not how it works. They're not going to adjust the scheme for just one player on their team. Aaron Glenn isn't coming in and he's not going to run the same thing that Robert Saleh is going to run. Like that's just not how it works. So now he's going to Indy where their defense coordinator out there probably is going to run something completely different than what he's seen or these past few seasons or this past season with Aaron Glenn. But when we talk about players over picks, there's always the other side of things too, where teams hold on to players when they should be getting picks, because that's the Miami Dolphins. And for me, I think the Dolphins, made a mistake, and the mistake that they made is they had players who could have been traded that they didn't trade, that they're holding on to. And
don't we see this in every sport? In baseball, every trade deadline, don't we see pending free agents on teams that aren't going to make it, where the owners say, no, we want more, or we're going to give it a try, or the GMs say, we just don't feel we got the value in the market for this player? Don't we see that every year?
Yeah, but I also think that the biggest problem that we see is that everybody, why does it always feel as if every team has to make a deal at the deadline? I understand that deadline spurs action, but it's just you have weeks leading up to the deadline where you can be making these trades. And, they got rid of the GM last week knowing that the deadline was coming up. And if you're the Dolphins, you're seeing the Patriots, right? This renaissance with the Patriots under Vrabel, where they look like they have something with Drake May. They look like a team that can contend in a few years, maybe even this season.
Aren't they contending right now?
Yeah, but who knows? I'm just saying that like the Bills to me are the class of the AFC East. They have been for the past few years. So now the Patriots are making that rebound. You just saw what the Jets did on that day. And listen, the Jets are a bad team, and they're probably worse than the Dolphins. But now they're sort of like restocking first round picks. So in 3 years, the Jets could be what the Patriots are right now. Who knows? But when you're the Dolphins, it doesn't look like they've done anything for their future. Anything. You're still going to have Tua there. Now you're going to need to bring in a new GM. You have aging players on defense that you might have been able to move for picks. And it just feels to me like they are being lapped by the rest of the AFC East by not making these moves.
Haven't they been lapped by the rest of football because they haven't won a playoff game since my son was born, since before he was born, and now he's on Wall Street? Haven't they been lapped because they've gotten it wrong with players constantly every single year? I mean, it's been a stretch of wrong for the Dolphins. And what I love about Le Batard's show is I think finally those guys are admitting that Stephen Ross is the worst owner in the history of Florida sports. That made me happy because he has to be.
Yeah, listen, that could definitely be it. But it's just if you're going to be an owner who's going to say, hey, we are going to be out there and we're going to contend, and I want to put a team on the field that Dolphins fans are happy to see, and blah, blah, blah. You can't do that until you move on from Tua, because we've already seen what Tua is, and Tua is not worth the price of admission. And I think people in Arizona are finally starting to see that with Kyler Murray. Maybe Jacksonville, who knows if they're going to start seeing that with Trevor Lawrence. And maybe we talk Renaissance, maybe we'll start seeing teams, not pay these crazy contracts to quarterbacks who frankly haven't done anything.
But the rules of football, it's hard to move on from Tua. The dead cap hit that the Dolphins would have is so
but they didn't need to pay
significant.
him. They didn't need to pay him.
Well, now we're talking. Are you coming to my side? Are you now of the thought that we are paying these players prematurely and horrifically?
No, I think I've always been on the side of quarterbacks, and I think we spoke last week or 2 weeks ago where I said quarterbacks need their own cap. They need their own one because owners, constantly make these mistakes in just paying so much money to these quarterbacks, and most of them are just average quarterbacks. And it ends up, putting their entire team back when the average quarterback ends up playing like the average quarterback.
Did you like my Chargers Nothing Personal Pick of the Day? Sponsored by DraftKings. Brought to you by DraftKings. Do you like Herbert over Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, but it's not even about that. It's with the Chargers right now. They have some problems on their offensive line where both their starting offensive tackles are done for the season. So you have Joe Alt and you have Rashawn Slater. They're both out. The Steelers defense has been called out so much recently. They just beat the Colts last week. There was a turnover fest for the Colts, but they hung tough in that game. But this is one of those games where you're looking for, if you're the Steelers, for TJ Watt to just dominate. You have two backup tackles, and the NFL has changed so much. It used to be you only needed a left tackle because the right defensive end was going to stay right there the entire game. Now those edge rushers travel the entire game. They go from left to right to left to right. So you really need, two good tackles. And now you have two backups in there. It could be a tough game, but the line indicates that the Chargers have some sort of advantage here. It's probably
You're too young, but you never watched Lawrence Taylor, right?
No.
So Lawrence Taylor is the greatest football player I ever saw play, and it's not even close. And it's not because I was a Giants fan. It's not because I saw every Giants game, because I watched back in those days every game I possibly could. There wasn't such thing as the ticket, but it didn't matter. You just saw highlights. And anyway, Lawrence Taylor would line up, and it was always a big comment by John Madden or Pat Summerall to point out where Lawrence Taylor is, because he was this roving linebacker. And the way football's changed properly, as you stated, there's no reason. The offense has to be set. The defense doesn't. They can move their positions and then just be set before the snap. And offense has men in motion all the time, and they've got different formations. It was only a matter of time until the defense had different formations. And the NFL has made it so they are an offensively driven league. They purposely have done it, just like the NBA. They want scoring because fans don't like 6-3 football games. Mm-hmm. Fans don't like 1-0 baseball games. Fans don't like 94-90 basketball games. Do you see the trend? It is all about offense. And I would just say that is one thing that I disagree with vehemently. A 1-0 baseball game can be the best game you've ever seen. It can be crisp. A football game that's 6-3 cannot be crisp, definitionally. But a baseball game can. A 94-90 basketball game can be well played, well thought out, well defended. I think football is the only sport where they have an excuse to be pro offense because those defensive, and I watched them with the Jets, Coca. I can't remember who the Jets play where the score was like always 6-3 or 9-6, but those games are unwatchable.
Yeah, well, that's because you're just not a fan of defense then, right? You know, because it's just like if there are two elite level defenses going at it, you know, you want to see scoring. Like that's what you want to see is scoring more than you want to see elite level defense being played.
Maybe in football, by maybe that's teams. True.
You know,
I don't like seeing pass interference in the end zones. I think that's
ugly. Because ugly offense, you know, is harder to watch than elite level defense. Is really what it is. You know, because when you see turnovers and you see, you know, sacks, and you see, you know, missed field goals or whatever, you know, that is uglier than looking at it from the other perspective of like, wow, you know, this defense is really dominating. You know,
but elite level really defense causes offenses to look ugly. It's the way that owners believe they need to fire their hitting coach when you are shut out 1-0 and you get 3 hits over a period of several games. When the baseball people would say, hey man, we just faced great pitching. Great pitching always makes it look like your team has no energy. Great pitching makes it look like that your team and their offensive approach is bad and you need a new hitting coach. But at the end of the day, sometimes great pitching is just great. And real baseball people know that great pitching will always beat great hitting every single time in baseball. Just wanted you to know that.
There was some breaking news during the first hour that we weren't able to get to because it was breaking. And it was a relationship.
Do you have the music?
Yeah, breaking news. Breaking news. It was a relationship that I didn't really understand outside of the economics. And that's ESPN Bet and Penn Gaming just announced that ESPN Bet will be no more, you know, starting December 1st. And this was just a strange relationship coming from a fan point of view, where it was just like,
why
that? Because that to me
was a place. Don't forget how this started. Do you remember how it started? So they had a relationship. They got rid of Barstool. They got rid of a company. And they decided to partner with ESPN to create what they thought would be a competitor to our partners, DraftKings, and to DraftKings competitors. They were trying to gain market share in an industry that has proven to have, there's two and then everybody else. And everybody else is just crushed. And so the question is, where can we be? And what ESPN Bet was supposed to be, they were supposed to gain enough market share to be a solid third with a way to possibly join the top 2 in the top tier. And it was a 10-year deal, but they knew going in. Don't forget what was announced when ESPN Bet was formed is, hey, we're going to try this, but these guys are so hard to compete against that if we can't get it done in 3 years, then we have the right to end it. So what year are they in? Because I assume what happened is ESPN Bet just
2.
So they didn't even make it 3 because I think all they realized is they couldn't compete with DK.
Yeah, but the problem is they misread the market completely. You know, they saw ESPN brand and ESPN saw gambling, and each of them wanted each other, But the problem there is they didn't take into account the viewers and the fans and why those people are going to ESPN. They're going to ESPN to watch games. They're going to ESPN for analysis. They're going to ESPN for reporting. They're not going to ESPN for gambling. And I think that was the problem in this relationship and misreading the market, is that gamblers go to gambling places. You know, they're not going to ESPN for their gambling or for their gambling information. You know, you're not sitting there watching, First Take because you want to, you want lines and you want odds. You're going there to watch the debate. You're going there to disagree with what Stephen A. Smith is. You're not watching these pregame shows for that. You're watching it for sort of the reporting on the game and the injury analysis. But I don't think those relationships, I don't think those can be intertwined. Like, I don't think they can be together. I don't think that they were the right people to deliver this to fans, and that's why they weren't able to, to gain anything in the market.
So just to be clear, because we're going to have a pretty serious disagreement about this concept, what you are saying is that the reason ESPN Bet failed is that the programming on ESPN was not meant to aid and abet ESPN Bet in succeeding. Did I hear your theory?
That's a simple way of saying it, sure.
Okay. Do you agree that we're on right now the DraftKings network? That's where this show is. And DraftKings is a sponsor of ours. Do you think that DraftKings is successful as a company because people go to DraftKings network to get gambling information in order to use that platform, DraftKings, for gambling?
No, I don't.
So neither do I. So let me give you my theory. My theory is that anytime, and the reason why the government gets involved in antitrust situations where there's not enough competitors in a marketplace. Do you remember Sirius and XM? Great example. There was Sirius, there was XM, there was nobody else. People tried, hey, let's see if we can get some satellite radio going. There were little bits and boops, done. Sirius and XM ended up merging. Why? Because their view was that together, we might as well take the entire market versus continuing to spend money to compete against each other because it's not giving us the right bang for the buck. The first thing that had to be established is there wasn't going to be anyone that could even approach what Sirius and XM were doing. Right now, the gambling sector, it is in its infancy. DraftKings and FanDuel have made it so they are the predominant players in the market, but it is not a fait accompli that they'll always be. So therefore, there is an incentive for companies to start, whether it's BetMGM, whether it's ESPN Bet. There is incentive to try, just like Enterprise with Avis and Hertz. There's always the top and then companies that try to get a niche. They try to find a way in to that market share. Totally normal, totally expected. The difference is, to me, that in the world of gambling, what DraftKings does, the way they work with the leagues, the way they have established themselves with their one main competitor has made it so there is no room for anything other than possible acquisition targets, the way Avis and Hertz started buying up the rental car companies below them. And what ESPN realized is that's not where we're headed. Penn Entertainment, that's not where we're headed. So to them, it is financially makes more sense to stop throwing money away at something that was not going to ever be profitable nor acquired, and they just are going to disappear. But, Coca, what's next? ESPN, you can bet your ass. They're doing a deal with one of the two top companies in gambling right now.
Yeah, but I don't think they're going to do the same deal that they just did. I don't believe that it's going to be their own sports book. I don't think it's going to be another.
100% not.
Yeah, it's not. It's going to be a brand partnership. Yeah,
100%.
A brand partnership. But what you just said is the same exact thing that I just said. The first thing that I said was that ESPN. I understood why ESPN and Penn would try and do this because ESPN, the brand name, and Penn trying to get that brand name. But it's like trying to put a Payless shoes on Rodeo Drive. It wasn't going to happen. Those people out there in Beverly Hills, they're not going to be shopping at Payless shoes. It didn't make sense for them to do this. I understand why they thought it would make sense, but they really, really, really misread what fans want out of ESPN, and it wasn't a sports book. They wanted more sports, more coverage of the sports, better analysis of the sports, better coverage of these sports. I don't think they wanted to go there to see, gambling because they can get gambling where they need to get gambling, right? They can get it on their phones.
Jimmy Pitaro had an interesting statement I'm seeing right now. He said, together, ESPN and Penn created a truly unique offering with unparalleled integrations across our various media assets. I don't think there was anything unique about it, but I digress. ESPN drove over 2.9 million new users into the Penn ecosystem. Obviously wasn't even close to what was projected, with a strong uptick in first-time bettors this fall. Still not what was projected or needed. And then he ended it with, we appreciate the collaboration we had with Penn and are now pursuing other media and marketing opportunities within this space. So there it is. That's obviously what they have to do for Disney. They can't let this segment. It's like podcasts. It's like shows or leagues not taking money from this industry. You have to take money from it if you're going to truly be competitive on the revenue side. So ESPN is not going to waste a minute, it seems like. They are going to start negotiating immediately with the other players in this space and cut a deal as soon as possible. I would assume that they're going to try first to have an exclusive deal, Coca, where they do a deal with one of the companies, but there is something to be said by not giving an exclusive deal and actually being able to partner with multiple of the companies in different ways. So we'll see what happens.
I always think it's funny when companies share like new users. So you said 2.9 million new users, but they never say active users, right? So this could just be 2.9 million people that signed up, used the book once, and then never did it again. Because if they're getting 2.9 million people to be using this, I feel like they would have had a successful partnership. Like, I feel like 2.9 million users, active users, is enough for this deal to have worked. I just don't think, I just think that's like more funny with PR.
It's hard to know what their projections were, what was required, and it's hard to know what they count. You're right. If someone signs up, and we do reads on this show, for new users, download the app and bet $5 and you get 300 in bonus bets using the code Samson. Getting new users matters. But from a revenue standpoint, you need the new users to turn up the pipeline into often users. And so it's a sweet spot of where you're filling the pipeline with people who naturally drop off the top because they stop for whatever reason. And so you need new ones coming in at the bottom as they sort of increase their desire to engage with the betting app. So new users is an important data point because it shows that they are refilling the pipeline. But in terms of public companies, which DK is, and what their results are, you're not just looking at new users, you're looking at active users, but you're also looking at old users, meaning users who become inactive and have not played in 12 months or 6 months, whatever number they so choose. So I appreciate what Jimmy Pitaro is doing, but I think if he had his choice, he would have preferred them to have gotten the market share that they projected to get and would have been a player against DK and FD in an effort to try to become a three-headed monster, which still to this day has not existed in that space. And I would say this is the latest example of a company trying and failing. And query, will, like BetMGM, will others continue to invest in order to try to be something that seems almost impossible to be?
Would you rather talk college football or UFC?
Well, I'm watching this movie this week about the Smashing Machine.
Okay.
So I need to learn something. Can you want to teach me something about UFC? Although the UFC subject I assume you want to talk about is the gambling. We've talked gambling for so much of this show. I mean, we might as well keep talking it.
Yeah, but once again, this is more coverage of it, than it is the providing of you being trying to be a sharp here. But essentially what happened in the UFC over the weekend, for those who are unaware, is there was a fighter, and this fighter was a heavy favorite going into his fight. And before his fight started, the line just oddly started to get smaller and smaller and smaller because these massive, massive bets were coming in on the underdog. And everybody was like, hold on, wait a minute. This is really, really weird. And the UFC is one of those sports where people are really, really paying attention. Gamblers are really, really paying attention to line movements. And this one just looked a little out of whack. And what happened was, the guy closed as a way shorter favorite than he opened up as. And in the first round, came out, got submitted, loses. And then right after that ended, all these sports books came out and said, okay, there was definitely something fishy going on here. I know some books had refunded those bets. Some books said they're monitoring the situation here. And then we have Dana White now coming out saying, listen, we spoke to this fighter. We told this fighter, hey, what is going on here? And the fighter said to me, I'm going to go out there and fight. I'm going to go out there and smash this guy. And it didn't happen. And now Dana White is communicating with the FBI, and there is something definitely going on, because now you have more fighters who are coming out saying, hey, before one of my fights, someone approached me about taking a dive. Someone approached me about, losing in this round or losing in that round. So this is going to become something really, really, really major. If it comes out that this guy really did take a dive for any sort of money.
So I never heard of Isaac Dulgarian, but is he the equivalent of Jannik Sinner? Was he the number one tennis player in the world type of thing, or is he a mediocre fighter?
No, I think the UFC is like one of those things where they're determining who fights who, right? So a lot of these times when you're trying to develop somebody into being, a top 10 ranked fighter, they're going to fight somebody who's not in their, not weight class, but in their fighting class. And his opponent was not in his fighting class. And it was one of those sort of like tune-up style fights where, maybe you're going to expect him to, for it to be a battle, but you were not expecting this guy to go out and lose in the first round. Especially
so do we agree
when you have the analyst during the fight saying, what he's doing to, combat the submission attempts that he's in, that's not taught. These aren't things that he's supposed to be doing. He's doing the opposite of what he's supposed to be doing. So
he threw the fight. Is that the theory here, that he threw the fight?
The theory right now is that he threw the fight.
Okay. So any individual sport, we're going to have an issue. Even forget team sports, which we've covered, and the issues in basketball they're going through right now, the issues in baseball, whatever the issues are, you worry about a team member having any sort of impact on a result because the integrity of the game matters so much. Individual sports, man, we've been worried about that for way before the onset of legal gambling. You've been worried about individual sports, tennis, golf, fighting, because how easy is it? Pulp Fiction, for crying out loud. It's right there. Bruce Willis taking money to take a dive and how he feels about the fact that he needs the money to run away with his girlfriend. That has been around forever. That has nothing to do with anything regarding gambling today. But the UFC has a problem. And the problem they have is they don't want to ever be confused with anything being scripted. I think Dana White is far more concerned about that than any sort of nefarious activity with known associates, mafia, gamblers, poker, etc. Because there are people who already think UFC is scripted, and that impacts his ability to generate the broadcast revenue and the other things he wants to generate for UFC. So I would assume that Dana White is very anxious about this and needs to get the word out that it is total horse hockey because of myriad other reasons. But
I
again,
just don't. What the mistake that I feel that Dana made was, if you have to approach a fighter and ask him if he's going to throw a fight because of irregularities in gambling, and we're not talking about $5 bets. We're talking about, I believe it was $16 million worth of money is coming in on the underdog to win this fight. If you have to approach the fighter and you've been tipped off by, these watchdog, gambling companies that are out there who are monitoring everything that's happening, don't pull the fight. Reschedule the fight, because something is happening. Because now you allowed that to go out. You allowed, this circus to happen. And then after it happens, you're going to cut the fighter, because that makes it even more suspicious that you knew something was happening and that something did happen, because you cut the fighter after the fight.
Do you reschedule a horse race when all of a sudden the odds change because some, crack guy who goes in and bets a gazillion dollars on a horse and the horse goes from 70-1 to 5-1? The odds are based on where the money is. I would assume with all the money going to the underdog, definitionally, it's going to get closer to an even fight, because aren't the odds with a horse race, the odds with a fight, aren't they based on where the money is?
You're misunderstanding this. This is like Duke versus North Carolina in basketball is happening, and there's the same night a Division II game is happening against two schools that nobody's ever heard of. And now millions of dollars are coming in on those two schools. That's what. So I didn't know that.
So the betting on this fight, in your mind, and that's been announced, the betting amount on this fight, you said $16 million to the underdog. That is an unusual amount.
It wasn't spread over the course of time. This was right before the fight happened that the line was moving like this. So that's what made it so fishy, and that's why these companies were able to pick up on it, is because of the volume of money that was coming in on the underdog of a fight that should not have gotten this sort of volume. So if Dana White dude, it happened in Vegas. USC's headquarters are in Vegas. This is the one locked in. They are locked in with these gambling companies and gambling. So to me, it just feels like a massive mistake on Dana White's part by allowing this fight to happen after you were tipped off that something shady was going on. And fighting is one of those sports where you can reschedule things whenever and just put these guys on another card to fight. But I would have figured this out first, because now you're in a really, really weird spot, and they just signed that massive deal with CBS and with Paramount. And the last thing you want is for it to come out that your fighters are throwing fights before that deal really goes into effect.
I'm going to look into this for next week, but what I'm curious about is what DraftKings is able to do is to help the NBA when there are lines of Terry Rozier and his prop bets, when there are irregularities, they're able to point that out. Are they able to point it out before the game even starts, or do they point it out after the fact? I thought they're able to point it out before it starts, and those games go on. Horse races go on. NBA games go on when there's irregularities. Tennis matches go on. So I figure in the UFC, with an irregularity, it wouldn't be on the table for the fight to be canceled, that the fight goes on and then you do the investigation and see what the hell happened.
Not with a private company like this, where Dana White he is the rule, right? Where he can just pull fights, he can move fights, he can do what he wants, and nobody's going to tell him otherwise. But that's it for this week.
No, we have two more things to talk about.
That's it.
No, I'm not willing to say goodbye. I'm going to stay here, Coca. I'm going to stay here. Thank you all for another great week. Coca, I love you for coming on the show with me. We'll be back Monday. Until then, it's just business. This is nothing personal.